Yes, good morning, everybody. Bon dia, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Kroener, Export Development Consultant at the Ministry of Economic Development. I will be your moderator for this webinar this morning. Welcome to the EU Funds Week. The EU Help Desk at the Ministry of Economic Development of Curacao welcome you to this EU Funds Week. The subject of this workshop this morning is consultancy opportunities through EU funding, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, RVO. Before we continue and give the floor to the speakers, I would like to inform you about the Curacao Island of Learning platform. It is a platform that transforms cities into thriving learning ecosystems. Learners, organizations, and public institutions can publish their learning opportunities, combine local and digital experiences through playlists, issue and earn digital open badges. Those are global standards for digital verified credentials, to value and recognize learning and achievements. After every session of the EU Funds Week, participants will be honored with digital open badges. These badges are validated displays of accomplishments, skills, quality, or interests that can be earned when successfully completing each session within the EU Funds Week. Each session includes skills from the ESCO database, the European Multilingual Classification of Skills, competences, qualifications, and occupations that later can be used as sort of endorsements and to enhance the participants' e-portfolio. In order to acquire a badge, after every workshop, the participants must comply with two requirements. You as a participant must attend the entire session without any intermission, and each participant, you as a participant, must send an email to edudesk curacao@gobiena.cw. Email address will be placed in the chat shortly. In order to register for the acquiring of their achieved digital open badge. Do you want to register as an organization on the Curacao Island of Learning platform and start using it for your learning activities? Then contact Janina Urbez via the same email address that will be placed in the chat. We will now hand the floor to Ronald Vermeeren and his team. And please note that if you have questions, to place them in the chat. These will be answered at the end of the presentation. Ronald, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sam. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, bon dia. It's both a pleasure and an honor to be a part of this European Funding Week. However, I will rather be on Curacao than in the cold atmosphere of the Netherlands we are having right now. My name is Ronald Vermeeren. I'm working for the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. I will tell something more about it in a few minutes. And I'm coordinator for the Dutch Caribbean. We have a small team of about 6 people who is dedicated working for the Dutch Caribbean, aka the 6 former Antilles, in supporting them and working together with them to reach a sustainable economy on all the islands. I'm doing this presentation together with my colleague Joyce Emid. She's an expert in grant management. She will tell something more about herself in a few minutes. I hope you enjoy our presentation, and you will have a lot of opportunities to answer questions afterwards, but also when the presentation is done, you are always in the possibility to contact us directly. Joyce, can you share the presentation, please?
Certainly. Let me see if I can have the right. Is it projecting?
Yes, it's projecting. It's
Perfect.
what we, or more specifically, Joyce is going to focus on is on consultancy possibilities in the complete grant management of EU funds in the coming few minutes. This is the agenda, short introduction about RVO and our dedicated agreement team. And then Joyce will have a glance on the funding landscape, or specifically what is relevant for organizations in Curacao. How does the funding process and the grant process look like? How does grant management look like? And more specifically, what kind of opportunities could there be for the consultancy market to jump into this? Next slide, please. The Netherlands Enterprise Agency, we are part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs. So in fact, we are the Ministry of Economic Affairs, which is the counterpart of the Ministry of Economic Development in Curacao. We are an implementing agency of the ministry, where the ministry makes policies. We try to make the policies to bring them into practice by developing all kind of projects, programs, funding schemes whatsoever. We do that on 4 pillars, which is sustainable entrepreneurship, which is innovative entrepreneurship, agriculture entrepreneurship, and international entrepreneurship. And some of you may already know some things about RVO, because in the beginning of 2018, the expert stimulation instruments we are hosting for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are open since 2018 for entrepreneurs also on the Dutch Caribbean. And from Curacao, we got a lot of applications, and luckily we're also in a position to grant that applications. Next slide, please, Joyce. As I said, we have a dedicated Caribbean team. We are also very lucky to have a couple of people in the team who are rooted on Curacao. And therefore we know the region quite well, and we know what could be working and what definitely won't work from a Dutch perspective. So that's very helpful to have a diverse team as we are having. We are aiming at fostering and enabling sustainable economical development, and sustainable development in the sense of not only with attention of the ecology, but also with attention of the social aspects like inclusion, like local job generation, and so on and so forth. We provide guidance, support in developing projects, developing initiatives, finding funds, with the focus on having real, tangible.
Ronald, you're muted. Yeah.
Yes, I'm back again.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I don't know what happened, but I'm sorry. Now we do that on the support of three ministries: Interior and Kingdom Relations, Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality, and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. So far, I will give over to my colleague Joyce to do the remainder of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ronald. Can everybody hear me loud and clearly? If not, please, Sam, indicate if I need to do something on the audio, because I can only see the presentation. Welcome everybody to the workshop. Unfortunately, we are doing this still online. We would rather be there with you on location, but this surprisingly also works. As I was mentioning, the workshop will be on EU grant management, but I will give also a short introduction of myself. It's also nice to get a bit personal and get acquainted with your presenter. I'm Joyce Emid. I'm a former grant management consultant, having worked 12 years in grant management of various EU-funded projects. I have a lot of experience with programs, thematic programs like such as LIFE, Horizon, Connecting Europe Facility, AFRO, Eurostars, many different types of programs. I've worked for many different types of entities, mainly in the private sector, but also public sector, municipalities, provinces, research institutions, ministries, and the like. So I have a broad experience, and I've been working in the full cycle of EU grant management, so from initiation throughout the closing of the projects after many years. So in that sense, I will give you my learnings and perspective on EU grant management, hopefully in order to provide a bit more tools and insights to approach the EU funding process and secure EU funding. Bit of scoping, bit of the scope of the workshop. It's, as I said, aimed at EU grant management. So I will briefly give a general overview of the EU funding landscape. It will be a snapshot as it is momentarily. I will not enter into details on the specific programs, as I already heard that my co-speakers this week will be providing details on programs which will be of relevance to you. And optionally, we may liaise with the EU desk from Curacao to see if there is a need or desire to have some follow-up sessions. So I already understood that the questions will be aggregated, and we will follow up with questions and answers at the end of the workshop. So let's start with providing a brief overview of the EU funding landscape as it is at the moment. But maybe just to start with the basic of EU public funding. As many of you know, if you've been involved with public funding is a specific form of financing which aims to realize certain policy objectives. So this is a very specific and dedicated means to an end. Momentarily, the EU grant providers have specific areas of interest, aiming at increasing technological innovation in order to stay competitive in the global landscape of technology developments, such as competitors as from the US or China. Also, one topic we cannot ignore at the moment, obviously, is the topic of climate change and the need to move towards sustainable solutions. Also, an important aspect to address is obviously international collaboration and international commerce, but also the need to address issues of social innovation must not be left behind. So this is also a few of the policy objectives which specific EU funding streams are dedicating their resources to. Public funding is always part of the co-financing solutions. So if a certain initiative aims to put forward a proposal for EU funding or any public funding, it's always part of the cost which may be compensated, and other co-financing must be put forward by the applicant or the beneficiary or the project promoter themselves. So it's always good to have a view how this funding solution may look like and which part of EU funding or public funding may compensate certain part of the project costs. At the moment, we are in an interesting moment in time because we are at the beginning of a new project period for EU funding ranging from 2021 to 2027. It's a new budget period established for the next 7 years. It's determined by 27 plus, now we're 27 member states and associated third countries. And the involvement of this many member states also makes the EU funding framework quite complex. If you've been involved with EU funding, you know there are a lot of requirements and rules to follow, and this is also as a result of the many stakeholders involved in developing these programs. Public funding has many types of forms. It may come in the form of direct grants, but also in the form of revolving funds or prizes. It's a varied landscape of 1,000+ programs and different calls spinning off these programs, these programs and calls are changing constantly over the course of the 7 years. So this makes it also quite a complex landscape to grasp, but they also be an opportunity for consultancy firms to have a role in this, in really functioning as guides through this funding landscape. EU funding programs are executed by certain centralized and decentralized executive agencies. And it's also always good to have a good relationship with these executive agencies because they are actually the gatekeepers of the EU funding resources. There are some thematic programs which are of relevance to you. These are the known programs Horizon Europe, Erasmus Plus, Life, Interreg. I have been made aware that you will be informed about these programs during this EU Fondsenweek, which is very interesting, obviously. And there are some new programs developed by the Commission focused on citizens, equality, rights and values, promoting democracy and equal rights, and the new European Bauhaus, which is more dedicated to the building environment. These are new programs of this new budget period. What are the benefits and possibly, pros and cons of EU funding? Well, EU funding can be interesting of financial and strategic importance. It can be a financial multiplier for certain projects or initiatives which are being developed. It may be a means to an end to tackle cross-border challenges. If an initiative is developed in isolation, it may not be as impactful or successful as it were combined with other cross-border stakeholders. So this can also be of a type of strategic importance. It's a means to an end also to enlarge impact, increase knowledge sharing with other potential project partners or other stakeholders within the EU funding landscape, and also a means to an end to develop best practices and really build on the learnings and be more successful moving forward. There are also some cons, so to say. As I mentioned earlier, it's there are many different calls and programs with different thematic and sometimes overlapping areas of interest. It's a complex environment, it's a demanding process, it's highly competitive because for a certain initiative there are many other players within EU and also in other third countries or overseas regions like yourselves, which are also aiming for the same budget. So the success rate is usually low. So this also may be yeah, a good starting point as a consultant to see what is actually the unique selling point of a certain initiative or certain project promoter, which can really be of added value to apply for EU funding, if this is the most optimal way to move forward. There are some trends. The competition is not decreasing, but certainly increasing. There's a move towards blended financing to really see how the EU funds can also leverage other types of financing, private financing, or other types of financiers. So it's always good to see what the project or a project promoter can, how other types of financing can be leveraged. Obviously, collaboration and innovation are also always part of EU funding projects, and this in relation to what is currently the state of the art or the level playing field. Well, having said these previous things, there's obviously some need for consultancy throughout this process, and not only for first-time appliers, but also for consortia or project promoters who are have been through this process before, because it's a time-consuming effort. Deadlines are always quite narrow, and so there is a lot which needs to be done in a short period of time. So identifying a good proposal and also a matching funding scheme, together with the engagement of the relevant stakeholders, are some of the activities which may be ideally executed by a consultancy firm. What does the EU funding process look like? Just a brief overview. If you are familiar with it, this may sound, this may seem, yeah, like obvious to you, but for new players in this field, it may be of some guidance. There are roughly, so to say, 3 phases in EU funding process. There's the first initiation phase where there's a project initiative or a concrete project which is looking for financing, and one of the phases is matching the project to the EU funding opportunities. Once this match has been established, you go into the phase once a decision has been made to apply for this funding, you go into the phase of the whole project proposal development, and which consists of all the required information and the supporting documents which are necessary to submit before the deadline. And if you're one of the lucky few, after submission of the grant package, then you're invited to sign the grant agreement, and this marks the start of the next phase, which is the project execution phase, and which may take to 1 or maybe several years, which consists of the execution of the project, but also of the grant management of the project, which entails all the required activities, such as progress reports and financial reports, in order to comply with the grant agreement. And so these are roughly the 3 main phases in the EU funding process. There are some key ingredients which always need to be taken into account during the EU funding process. Roughly, as I said before, of developing the project scope in alignment with a matching funding scheme. To this end, you may want to develop a certain grant strategy in order to really have a clear view on how you will go about securing this grant. This may go hand in hand with establishing a funding roadmap so that it's clear which steps need to be taken to secure a funding. And sometimes you may want to combine different types of funding schemes during the multi-year development of a project or the rollout until market introduction, and you may want to combine different types of programs over a period of multiple years. Also, what is important is to determine which parties are the main stakeholders in the project, which may consist of the project partners with whom the project will be executed, but may also be stakeholders outside of the project, but who may be of interest in who may be of interest while implementing the project in order to have the maximum impact of your project results. And another type of activity, which is part of consultancy during this process, is the full project management and compliance with the grant agreement, but also submitting the required application files or progress reports. So this is more not the administrative part, but more in developing the proposal side and the required documents which are part of the submission. It's important to take into account the gateway criteria of EU funding schemes. There are some eligibility criteria which a consultancy firm can advise upon. Their eligibility criteria are a bit different for different funding programs and for different calls, but largely they include the following 4 criteria, which are the applicant requirements. Certain programs are dedicated specifically, for example, to SMEs, or exclude SMEs, or are dedicated to public institutions or research institutions. So guiding through these requirements may be also a role of a consultancy firm to provide guidance in. There's also the operational and financial capacity, because obviously when grant agreement is assigned or funding is allocated to a project, the grant provider also wants to ensure that the project will be executed by a project promoter who is capable of doing so. So establishing what is the track record of the applicant is quite important to put forward very clearly during a proposal, and the financial capacity as well. And the financial capacity entails the financial means of the co-financing part, which will be required during the period that the project is executed. And these requirements vary per scheme, so it's really important to be able to advise what are the requirements at a certain funding program has been established, matching the project initiative of the project promoter. There are also gateway criteria is the award criteria per funding program, obviously. One of the main issues to take into account is the issue of relevance. What is the in terms of EU public funding, what is the EU added value of the project? And in this regard, it's important for overseas countries to really assess in which way you can collaborate with EU partners or in which way you can highlight that the project initiative is adding value to realize the policy objectives the EU program you are applying for is contributing to. So this is of importance because this may also change and vary over time, and it's very good to know what has been, for example, been funded in the past few years in order to be of added value when you submit a new proposal, to really put forward that your initiative is moving the landscape forward. This also is linked to the topic of excellence. What is the added value of a project in relation to the state of the art? Obviously, the public funding needs to be of added value to other players in the same domain or for society, and you need to make clear how this project will add to that. Then you have you need to clarify what is the impact, and that's a bit more in quantifying terms, really detailing the previous points. And then we also have an issue of quality, which really highlights how well thought out the project is been proposed. So can you really establish if the project is in its initiation phase, or have you really thought out how this project will be implemented? What type of project control means you are able to implement during the project in order to give the grant provider some assurance that the money will be well allocated once given to this project. Well, you have the whole application package. If you aim to submit a proposal, which may vary by funding scheme, but largely it consists of a project plan, which can be extensive, detailing the previous award criteria, and a consultancy firm may support in developing this project plan, but also there may be certain compulsory documents required to submit together with the project plan in order to really argument the points you put forward in the project plan. This may consist of business plan, greenhouse gas calculations, or other types of supporting documents which really make the project plan more concrete. And in my experience, it's one of the points which has been stressed upon in the latest funding schemes, that there is some concrete evidence of everything you put forward in the project plan. So clear evidence is always makes the project stronger. There are also other types of supporting documents which may accompany the application package, which are not compulsory, but which may aid to strengthen your case, such as letters of support of stakeholders within the value chain, which really highlights that there is a need for your project to be executed. So that's not that you can really convince the evaluators that the project is not being developed in isolation, but there's a large support base and need for your project to be developed, and that the project results really become implemented. As I mentioned before, there are also some types of administrative forms to really address who are the applicants, and that the applicants are really eligible to submit or to request the funding. And there are maybe other types of requirements, such as compliance with state aid, etc. So what type of funding services can be developed to really get a grip on the previous funding process and to support project promoters in putting forward successful applications? Well, if you go, as I mentioned before, there are certain types of there's certain types of phases, and you may want to question if in which part you can be of most where you can provide the added value. Is it in certain type of phases during this process, or do you want to go about the whole full cycle of grant management? So this would be one of my questions maybe to you, where if you can identify where you can be of most added value and where you can support project promoters with. As I mentioned before, I worked in the full cycle of grant management, so from ideation to closing of the project. I will go into a little bit more detail on these phases in the next slides. But also what is important to question, which is your area of expertise. I can imagine that larger firms may combine different types of expertises in-house, but maybe smaller firms or sole consultants may have a specific area of expertise, and this is where you can be of most added value to project promoters, because you really know the ins and outs of where the state of the art is moving to and what are the specific requirements of a certain funding program. For instance, the LIFE program as another type of priority than, for example, Horizon or the CEF. So it's really good to know where lays your area of expertise, so you'll be able to really support with knowledge of the domain involved. If we go into the grant management services, in the first phase, there may be it may be of added value if you can provide guidance or advisory in terms of identifying funding opportunities. It's good to have a clear objective on how the project matches a certain policy objective. It's important to create funding and awareness, but it's also important to be able to match the project with a certain funding scheme, and this more often than not relates to where the project is in its own maturation phase. If you are familiar with Horizon, you're familiar with this diagram, which is based on the technology readiness level. And this also is a guidance in matching which types of funding programs are of alignment, which funding programs align with a certain project in a certain phase. And if you are in the first phase, then maybe of use to develop a funding strategy together with the project promoter to see how the project can make use of certain types of funding programs, or how this may be rolled out during the multi-annual development of a project. So how you can,
Yes, sorry. Just sorry to disturb. We don't have much time, and just trying to get to the point where some answers that are being put forward can be answered. So maybe keep that in mind.
Okay, thanks, Sam. I'll try to wrap up there. I think there are not too many slides. And let's see. Yeah, so as I was saying, it's interesting to see if you can develop a grant strategy or a funding roadmap for the client to really guide through the funding landscape. Consortium building may be one of the services you aid project promoters with. It's always good to know that it's certainly EU funding projects require more often than not a consortium to include with a proposal or to develop the proposal with, and these parties may be of complementary capacity. For instance, a public institution, private sector bodies, and research institution. So this may be one of the advisory activities you may help project promoters with, to look for certain consortium partners or to advise on a certain consortium. Let's see. Yeah, then also if you go through the next phase, which is the application, developing the application package and all that it entails. I briefly discussed this before, so maybe we can go to the next phase, which is the grant agreement negotiations phase, where you liaise with grant provider to really establish the conditions of the grant. And then you enter into the next phase where you may provide support in guiding with compliance of the grant agreement or setting up consortium agreements and give advice on IP or depending on the requirements of the grant agreement, you may assist in setting up the administration of the organizations involved in order to ensure that the project complies with the requirements of the grant agreement in terms of financial administration and technical administration. So as to sum up, what can the role of consultancies be? It can be full cycle grant management from ideation to closing up the project, but it can also be providing specific expertise in certain part of a EU funding application, or consisting of a business plan, or really providing guidance on project management. So this is really something you should discuss with the project promoter, and also, depending on your area of expertise. Maybe some closing remarks. As I mentioned before, the EU funding landscape is complex and demanding and competitive, but there are many benefits which may be part of, which may spin off of being part of a EU funding project. One is, it increases visibility, you gain knowledge sharing, and you're able to network, other than the financial benefits, obviously. Maybe some last words before we go to the Q&A. Tips and tricks. In my opinion, it's always good to provide some guidance on creating awareness to really guide through the EU funding landscape and to match concrete EU programs to a funding initiative, to really provide guidance in administrations to ensure a good and engagement of different business units within our organizations to comply with the grant agreement to ensure the money is not only secured during the proposal phase, but also during the execution phase, and that it's money well spent, because in the end, the EU wants to support good projects, and they do not want to have to reclaim it. So it's I think it's a important task for consultancies to advise on good funding schemes, to guide, to have develop strong proposals, but also to really ensure that the requirements of the grant agreement are complied with, and in order to support applicants to realize sustainable and societal impact. So then I will stop sharing, and maybe we can go to the Q&A.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
Joyce, for that very well thought of presentation. A lot of information. Just want to start up with some quick remarks before we go to the questions. We have 5 more minutes in this session of presentation. Just some quick points. It is still required to have hard copy submissions, right, instead of electronic?
It really depends on the program. In my experience, most programs are moving to online portals, submission portals. Yeah. So this is a huge help. So you don't have to have large packages of.
Yeah. That has been an issue with the EU, that only required in the past hard copy submissions. Also, the issue of framework contracts. I don't think it's time to address those, but those are still valid for those consultants that want to participate in a consortia with European firms or other consultancy firms in the world, participating across the globe, because at some point they were African, for instance, African projects where only people with African citizenship or could participate, but that's not so much the case anymore, right?
Sorry, I didn't.
In terms of the nationality, it's not an issue to participate anymore in any kind of consultancy. The nationality of the consultant.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. No. No. For a while, it was only for Caribbean or African consultants. Those from the Caribbean can only participate in the Caribbean consultancies. Yeah. So not anymore. Going to the questions. The question I just asked here, is there a matrix mapping the eligibility criteria with the types of schemes prototypes?
There's not one that I know of, because it also changes. Per call text, it can change. So I would be careful with developing this matrix, because you really actually have to update this every time a new call text is published. But obviously there are some general eligibility criteria which, for example, are valid for Horizon, and they will maintain for the coming years.
And very important point you raised in your presentation about looking at the eligibility criteria before you move forward with a project, because sometimes that could be a surprise when you realize that you like the project or you're fit in it, but you're not eligible. An important question also here asked by, what about the project, a national state-of-the-art Institute of Culture for the island of Curacao, that will serve as a catalyst of cultural exchange and enrichment for the island, the whole Dutch Caribbean and the Caribbean region, and serve as a cultural bridge with Europe? Any suggestions on the possible strategic partners in the area of culture?
Not on the top of my mind immediately, I must say.
I would suggest for participants to be in touch with you about it, maybe via email.
Yes, they can get in touch with me. I may give them a connection because I spoke with someone from one of the famous museums here in the Netherlands who was working there as a project manager. And he wants to do something with the relation between Dutch and Caribbean art. So that might be a link. So please let them contact me.
Great. Thank you, Ronald. We're running out of time. I'm notified here, but I just want to have one more. Is there a link available where we can access more info about the discussed topics in this presentation, and where and when will the recording of this presentation be available? On the latter, we already mentioned that the recording will be available after the whole week, and the link available where you can access more info, same, to be in touch with you. Hello?
Yeah, I think the presentation will be shared afterwards, and there are our contact details.
We're in the presentation, which then we'll allow participants to touch base with you if needed.
Yes.
I'm sure it's overwhelming. It's a lot of information to share within a short period of time. But ladies and gentlemen, we have to end this session of the EU Funds Week for this morning because there's the next one shortly after. So I want to thank the presenters, Joyce Emid and Ronald Vermeeren, for their contribution this morning. And yes, let's hope that there will be many questions asked and information generated by the participants by connecting with you, with the RVO. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Right.